Mounting the Prony brake. Right now we have our motor mounted, leveled, brake drum assembled. Next is the Prony brake assembly. Now for the Prony brake assembly, it's important to know the rotation of the motor. In the case of the motors, looking into the motor, they will spin clockwise from the front of the motor, or if you want to think for the back of the motor, counterclockwise. But from the top, they basically spin from here, around this way, and back around. I want to stick a left-handed rule there with the thumb sticking out of the shaft to go in the direction of the fingers. So on a Prony brake, what will happen there is as we pull across, the motor wants to have the back edge pulled down, which will pull up against the spring. So that's why it's important when the motor runs this way to be able to recognize which way we pull down the Prony brake. That's why the spring has to be mounted the same direction as the motor nameplate. That's not the case with all motors, but for this particular motor setup and connection it is. Up top of this Prony brake is a thumb screw, which will be turned counterclockwise, loosens the strap, clockwise, tightens the strap. We move to loosen the strap so that we can easily slide the strap underneath the drum, and there are 4 holes in the table, 2 here, 2 in the back, through which we have the mounting holes for the Prony brake. Notice that for this particular Prony brake mounting on a drum, we have to move the motor back to the back 2 slots. Not the front slot here, but these back 2 slots where the motor goes. If we do that, magically, this all lines up. Now to screw down the Prony brake, we need hardware. Again, to fit in the holes, 5/16 hardware, and unlike what the book mentions, we use 1.5 inch, not 1.25 inch bolts. We don't have the 1.25s, so as always, the next longer size just means a little bit sticks out underneath the nut. Too short means we don't get enough threads on the nut to assure that we're locked down. So again, putting in the hardware, bolt head, flat washer up top, drop through the hole, from underneath, flat washer, followed by spring or lock washer, followed by 5/16 nut, and these are put in initially by hand. Usually put a finger on top and fish from underneath. First a flat, then a lock, then I put in the hex nut, and finger tighten the assembly. Just make a little bit to hold in place. And once I do that, I proceed to do the same thing with the next 4 bolts. Now, next thing we need to add to our assembly is water. See? Water. It says water right on there. We'll fill this back end of this drum with water up to the bottom lip, usually by squeezing. Squirts a stream, as you can see, a long stream there. And the book recommendation is about 1/4 inch below the lip. That's a good rule of thumb. It's about 1/4 inch now. You can do it from feel. You see just about it's starting to puddle and drip down here, although you don't catch it on camera. The reason for that being is that when you use a Prony brake, it's a strap that provides friction. And friction will provide heat when turning. High rate of speed, friction strap will generate lots of heat. The water is to cool the drum, to keep it from being flame hot, because if it gets too hot, it'll be too hot to handle. Now notice how loose this fits. This is set for 0 in inch-pounds. If I want to set a torque, I merely turn, and for instance, if I want to set to 8 ounces, over on this side, I will turn the knob until I finally get that's about 4 ounces there. The 8 ounce mark is right there. This is 8 ounces. Then I want to tighten this nut on top, and I'll tighten until this starts to pull snug. The strap should be a little snug at the point of applying torque or ounces. First of all, we add the ounces on a spring scale. A spring scale is a force. So we add the force here. For instance, if I want to set 8 ounces, then I want to turn this until I get the indicator here to go down to 8. I'm going to zoom in on this so that you can see this a little tighter as I tighten this knob up to get a tightened strap, and I want to zoom in to make sure that you can see what this indicator says. Now in tightening, you can see the numbers on the left side, right side actually to you, in ounces. If you wanted to measure in grams, it would be over in this column. We use the ounces here in the English system. Starts off at 0, 8, 16, 24, and graduations of basically 8 for the large numbers. So if I keep tightening, I can get over to 8 ounces. There we're at 8, and that's 8 ounces of force. On the strap itself, it's feeling fairly tight. I'm going to move the camera over so that you can see, as I pull on this, that's got some snugness to it now. And turn this, you can see that there's a fair amount of lift now as the thing moves. Now in that lift, you can see we're down to over 72 ounces. Ordinarily, when I showed you how to tighten this up, you ordinarily would not tighten this while it were standing still. Always start the motor loose. And that's a hint there in all motor starting in lab. Start with the strap really loose, barely touching the drum if at all. There's no reason for it to touch at all. Start the motor, then tighten up. Rationale for this being is when we first had it tightened up and the motor started turning, it would automatically pull and show a much higher number. That's not our first start is not a realistic number. We should start open circuit, no torque starting, much easier on the motors. Motors will generate a tremendous amount of start torque up to 600% current at startup. So we want as little torque as possible and as little load as possible on the motor when we start up. And once we're running, then we can, it's okay to adjust to whether we want 0 again or whether we want 8. In the case of the motor was running for a while, I would be loosening here until I reached 8. And that would be 8 here. And when I stop the motor, most likely a lot of the force would drop off.